Hello everyone, how's it going? And welcome to my Wild Rift tier list for patch 5.1a. First patch of patch 5.1, we've had a big shift up in terms of items. With buffs happened to some of the ruin items. We've had nerfs to some of the light items. We had obviously the hotfix patch before with like Infinity Orb getting nerfed. We had Ghost Blade also getting nerfed as well. So these light items are coming down in power and these ruin items are going up in power, which means that some champions are now a lot stronger, obviously with all the buffs and nerfs that happened in patch 5.1a. Apologies that this is a bit of a late tier list. I kind of waited until VIEGO came out, and also I haven't been able to do as much content as what I wanted to since I've been moving into my new place. But I think I've settled in now. I've got a lot of great content planned for you all. So let's talk about the changes for this patch. First, I think I want to go straight to the jungle role, since it has the biggest impact in my opinion in terms of champion changes and also item changes and everything else. There are quite a few S+ tier champions that you expect to see here. These are all champions that are still incredibly strong. You know, Evelyn with her invisibility, Lee Sin, Talon, Hecarim, and Xin Zhao. All these champions are still incredibly strong in pretty much most scenarios. There are some champions though that have moved down from S+ tier down to S tier. Kindred got a really heavy nerf this patch. Both the AD and also the AD per level went down, which meant that their power is not as strong as what it was before. And I think the Kindred is definitely not as strong as what they were a few patches ago, or maybe even the release and the hotfix buff that they received. But Kindred not as strong as what they were before, and kind of same with things like Shadow Assassin, Kayn, and also Kha'Zix. I think with First Strike getting nerfed, we've kind of seen them falling out the meta ever so slightly, with champions like, as I mentioned before, with Hecarim and Xin Zhao being really strong junglers at the moment, with them running Conqueror. Obviously Lee Sin can still run Conqueror as well. There are still some champions that can still run First Strike that are still going to be really strong. Champions like Talon and Evelyn, I think these two are still the best First Strike users in the jungle that can still have great carry potential. But I think it's kind of a struggling meta for champions like Kha'Zix and Shadow Assassin Kayn, where maybe they don't have the same leeway as what they did before, with kind of how they can work and how they can snowball the game, which can be a little bit difficult for them. Lilia, no surprise that Lydia's sitting up here. I think a lot of people shouldn't be surprised. When you buff Lydia's two main damage abilities, her first ability and her second ability, you buff the AP ratio and you buff the base damage of both of these abilities as well. There's no surprise that Lydia is going to be sitting up there. It's nice to have an AP alternative as a jungler. Lydia does play a bit differently to other junglers. However, I do think that she's very strong. She's very annoying to deal with as well, with all of her movement speed and her running around fights. The sleep can be such a game changer as well. So I feel like Lilia can definitely be one of the best performing junglers in this meta, because of the way that First Strike got nerfed. You know, one shot got nerfed in general, like one shot assassins means champions like Lilia can stay alive a lot longer and actually dodge abilities and actually benefit a lot from the changes. Yone is another one I want to shout out as well. Yone is going back to the original build with Ruin Blade of the Ruin King and Bloodthirster being two heal items on top of each other. And then you can build the Ruin Infinity Edge. You have two Ruin items with Ruin Infinity Edge dealing so much damage, and Ruin Blade of the Ruin King allowing you to heal up and steal a bunch of HP and also movement speed as well at the same time, which means that Yone is now, in my opinion, still going to be one of the best junglers up there. I think he kind of fell out a little bit with Blade of Ruin King Infinity Edge kind of getting a bit nerfed. I mean, Infinity Edge got a bit buffed because the crit damage went up, but Blade of Ruin King wasn't really viable as a first item, but now it's more viable as a first item. Incredibly strong for Yone. I think Yone at 3 items is one of the best junglers to play right now in the meta. In terms of other champions in the S tier, no surprise that all these champions are going to be staying up here. Vi, because of her lockdown, is still really strong. Jarvan, Gragas, Aatrox. Aatrox also still very good as well if you go full damage. Kayn and also Volibear, all these champions are really good. Now Viego is sitting down in A tier, not S tier, not S+ tier, sitting down in A tier. Now there are some scenarios where Viego can be very strong, and I think stealing champions' abilities and taking over their soul is a very powerful passive to have. However, there are a few downsides to Viego at the moment. One is just crowd control in general. Crowd control is the biggest counter to Viego. And there's so much in the meta at the moment. And honestly, it's very difficult for Viego since he does have such little base health. I think there's a few things that definitely need to be buffed with Viego. You know, his base health is one of them. He's not tanky at all, even if you go for items like Trinity Force, Obviously, Blade Run King is going to reduce your health, but going for items like Trinity Force and also going for either defensive boots or just building more tank items after that, like Sterix Gauge as well, you still feel super squishy. You still feel like it's very, very difficult. He is a super fun champion to play. I still recommend to play him. However, I don't think that he is as good as what people maybe think he might be. I think a lot of people just look at VIEGO and look at the PC League version of VIEGO. It's like, wow, this champion's really strong. Try to use it in Wild Rift. Again, not as strong. Completely different game, obviously. Fizz, I moved back down. I mean, I just don't think Fizz is that strong at the moment, unfortunately. Echo did get a bit of a buff. I still don't think Echo is really that strong even after the buff. Didn't really hit the same as Lilia. Lilia is definitely a lot stronger. Echo still kind of struggles a little bit. Maybe it's because of all the first strike changes as well. Tryndamere have actually moved up from B into A. I think the reason why I have Master Yi and Tryndamere up here now is just kind of the easy to play champions. You know, if you're in low elo, if you're in ranks like silver or gold, etc., then these champions are going to be really, really good for you. High elo you go, the more difficult these champions become. But I think to climb lower elo, if you play jungle, then these are two great champions, which is why they're kind of in the middle of the pack. Because like if it's low elo, they'd be like SS plus tier, for example. But in high elo, they're much lower. But again, just kind of the reason why they're middle tier at the moment. Again, A tier champions, some of them work really well. Nunu got a bit of a buff. Still don't think Nunu is still that strong. Dyna can still work as a great carry. Same with Nautilus as well. Fiddlesticks can still work pretty well. Gwen, if you can scale and get a few items, again, can be very, very strong. But still kind of the same thing here with A tier. Just solid champions that are strong. They could be pretty good in the right situations. B tier, I've moved some champions down. Rengar just doesn't hit the same as what he used to before. Rengar just doesn't have the one-shot potential. Again, kind of struggles with first strike. You can't really go for his bruiser build anymore that you used to go for before. Again, a bit of a difficult champion that just doesn't have the same impact as other assassins in the meta. Camille just clears through jungle way too slowly. You can have the impact with the ultimate and with ganking, but just clears the jungle way too slowly. And Shen just doesn't have the impact that I really thought he would get. I think it's just a case of players probably not being able to be as proactive in terms of the lane and trying to make more advantages for Shen. Whereas like Shen, you're just AFK farming through the jungle. You're hoping to get a counter gank with the ultimate, which can still work, but just not really as effective. And again, other B tier champions are just not going to be as strong as the champions above, but they can still work in the right scenario, except for Warwick. This champion just sucks. I don't know what they've done to Warwick, but the champion's just terrible. But that's the big changes in jungle. I'm going to go through the other roles, obviously, and talk about the other changes that I've made. But to be honest, all the other roles are not really changed too much. Baron lane, you can see most of the S plus tier champions have stayed the same. I've just moved Jax down just because I think the removal of Hullbreaker definitely hurt Jax. I still think Jax is a really strong champion. That's why he's in S tier. But I just don't think he's as strong as the other champions. You know, you think of all these champions now. Aatrox incredibly powerful. Renekton really good at early game as well. Urgot still really strong. Akali and also Ornn is the best tank in the Baron lane. And Jax can't have that side lane pressure that he used to have before. You kind of have to join team fights. And all these champions are amazing in team fights, which is such a big thing now for Baron laners. Whereas split pushers, not as strong as what they were before. S tier champions though, still pretty strong champions up here. You know, Garen, super easy to play. Camille, Fiora, Gwen still works really well. If you want to play more tanks, Sion and Dr. Mundo are also pretty good. Jace, Jax, Set, they're all still really good champions. A tier, I think I moved Wukong down. Oh no, I didn't move Wukong down. Wukong was already down here. I think I moved Wukong down in the jungle, didn't I? Yeah, I moved Wukong down in jungle just because Wukong is... I don't think Wukong after rework has really hit the right spot. I think Wukong definitely needs a few changes after rework. Same with Baron lane Wukong as well. Just doesn't hit the same anymore. You can't heal anymore with your first ability, which makes it really difficult. But yeah, Darius I've moved down into A tier. Champion just doesn't really do that much, unfortunately. Can easily be kited, can easily just be CC'd. Really hard for him to get resets. Quite difficult. And there's some champions here that can definitely cheese and do, you know, you can do really well with. Yasuo, if you're playing more tanky in the Baron lane, can perform pretty well. Teemo is not too bad in the Baron lane as well, after a few buffs, after a few recent patches. Yone top lane can do pretty well. Vladimir, Kennen, you know, there are quite a few champions in A tier that can perform pretty well. And there's not that many champions in B and C tier. Tryndamere is just a lot better in the jungle since you kind of negate the bad early game that he has. You can just AFK farm through the jungle. Olaf just doesn't have the same trading power. Same with Pantheon as well, just works a lot better as a jungler. Kayle Nasus just takes way too long to come online in terms of scaling, and Singe just doesn't really do anything. I mean, people can try to prove me wrong about Singed, but to be honest, again, another champion that kind of runs around and doesn't really do much, in my opinion. Moving into mid lane, again, a few small changes here and there, nothing as big as jungle. 2 champions moved down from S+ tier. The champions that are still in S+ tier are still very strong. You know, Kali, Aurelion Sol is just disgusting. Vladimir and Kassadin, all these champions are still really good. 2 champions have moved down though. Zoe, after the nerf, definitely not as powerful as what she was before. She still has pretty good scaling and she can still one-shot if she does land her bubble, but she just doesn't have the same trading power as what she did before. And the same with Syndra. Again, Syndra, a champion that can still do really well, and you can get quite a few picks with Syndra and you can get quite a few kills. But again, just doesn't have the same power as what she did before. Yasuo, I was very tempted to move up into S+ tier, but I think the thing is with Yasuo is that he's just super difficult to play, especially for like newer players and just players that don't really understand Yasuo. I mean, I've been seeing Yasuo's pop off in some of my games, but these are players that have played Yasuo on mobile for such a long time, or maybe they played him on PC before. But overall, the champion is incredibly strong right now, and obviously got the skin buff as well, so of course they're going to be strong. Lucian's still really good mid lane. Yone, you still got other mages as well, like Ahri and Vex, and also Ziggs, which are really strong. Or you can play someone like Jace as well, who still has an aggressive early game in the mid lane. A-tier champions, I don't think anything has really changed with the A-tier champions. I think these champions can work in the right scenarios. I think they can still be quite good. You know, if you're really good at Akshan, I think Akshan could be really good. Lux mid lane's pretty easy to play and pretty nice to play. Irelia, if you know how to play Irelia, you can play super aggressive in mid lane and get a lot of crazy early kills. Kenna mid lane can still work even after a few nerfs. I mean, overall, all the A-tier champions are pretty decent. B tier, I mean, these champions are just not that great. I've moved quite a few champions down to B tier. Katarina being one of them. Again, as I mentioned already, CC is such a huge thing at the moment. There's so many champions that have such a lot of crowd control that it's very, very difficult to get Katarina working. And also with the nerf to first strike as well, makes it even more difficult for Katarina to get online. Diana as well, just very difficult to make work in the mid lane. You just have such a weak early game that you need to try and farm and scale, but it makes it even more difficult. And other champions in the B tier, you know, Karma, Seraphine, Annie, these are champions that can work, but they just don't have the same sort of power and the same sort of proactiveness as the other mid laners. And then you have champions like Morgana, Brandon, Kayle in the C tier, which again, no surprise that they're really down in the C tier. Duo lane, again, not really too many changes, a few changes here and there. Caitlyn, Xayah, still 2 of the best AD carries right now. For sure. I was tempted to move Lucian down into S tier, but I think with the buff of empowerment, can definitely make Lucian a lot stronger. I think a lot of people are getting completely baited by Lucian builds though. They're going like Solari Charge Blade first item into like Infinity Edge and some of I don't know what people are thinking, but they're just going the most ridiculous troll builds I've ever seen, like Solari Charge Blade first item. Like, let's buy an item that gives 0 AD to Lucian that has incredible AD scaling on all of his abilities and also his auto attacks, and can also double auto attack as well with his third ability. So I think people are just getting baited by Lucian builds. Like top rank Lucian builds are building like Solari Charge Blade first item. Like, yeah, it's not really a thing. Just go like Bloodthirster IE into Solari Charge Blade if you want to third item, and then just go that way. But yeah, Lucian still pretty strong, super aggressive AD carry that you can get an early lead with. S tier, you still got champions that's still really good. You know, you got the hyper late game champions like Kai'Sa, Severe, Zeri, and Tristana. All these champions are really good. Ezreal still works out pretty well. You can still do pretty well with Ezreal in terms of the poke damage, but doesn't really have that much power and that much carry potential compared to the other hyper carries. Varus is still really good as well. You can go like 3 or 4 different builds with Varus, and they're all very, very powerful. I've moved a few champions down from S tier down to A tier. Samira being one of them with the nerf to Samira. The Samira nerf was really disgusting, by the way. Like, it was a really, really heavy nerf, which I'm super surprised about. But that nerf definitely moved Samira down into A tier, in my opinion. Was a difficult champion to play with in the first place, but was just strong enough to be an S tier champion and strong enough to be in the S tier. But now with the nerfs, definitely a lot more difficult champion to play, and is not going to be in the S tier, in my opinion. Jhin as well, just very difficult to try and carry with. doesn't really have an item build going for him. His item build is like really weird at the moment, but maybe you can try and get him going. Kalista I think is decent, can be S tier, can be A tier, can be decently well. Again, it's just players knowing how to play Kalista. And then you have other late game carries. Jinx and Vayne, pretty decent. Draven as well is not too bad as an early game champion. Ashe, Neela, and Corki. And then down in C tier, unfortunately, is Twitch. Twitch had like a bit of a lifeline where he was in like B/A tier. But then again, for some reason, they nerfed Twitch. Like Twitch had 0 success, I think, outside of China. I think in China, Twitch had like the 2nd or 3rd highest win rate in terms of AD carries because they went for some stupid build. And to be fair, China meta is probably completely different to like EU meta or NA meta. But I've never seen a Twitch be successful in dual lane, and I still can't put him above B or A tier, especially after him being nerfed as well. It just seems like the changes overall in terms of patches are just to do with China. Like they don't take into consideration the stats or anything from like Europe or America, MENA, or all the other regions as well. I think they just don't care. Honestly, they just look at China stats. They're just like, cool, this champion's doing really well. Like you look at China stats at the moment and you look on the website and you're just like, cool. Once this loads eventually, I'm not too sure why it's taking so long to load. Yeah, you just go on here and you're just like, you can just kind of predict already. Like, hey, Teemo might get a nerf next patch. You look at this. Oh, look, Lily is the highest win rate, even though I don't think Lily is that strong. But hey, Lily is going to get a nerf next patch. Maybe Teemo again. You know, Teemo has the highest win rate. Caitlyn, I mean, these are pretty decent because these are all like 53, below 53. Same with this as well. But like, you can see already that Lily is here. I mean, look at VIEGO as well. VIEGO, 49%, a 39% win rate. Honestly, I think this is just people getting used to VIEGO. I don't think he's that weak. Yeah, it's kind of scary. But yeah, VIEGO buff next patch probably going to happen. And then you get to the support role. I don't think anything has changed with the support role, to be fair. I still think your strongest tank is Nautilus. Your strongest kind of enchanter is Yuumi. You still have Lux in there and also Pyke as a main carry as well. All the S tier champions are great as well. You know, Janna's been performing pretty well with Soraka recently. I think Janna is very good at appealing support if you want to go for that route. Thresh Leona also pretty good. Karma and Lulu, again, pretty decent enchanters. And then you can go Rakan as a tank or even as a carry. I think one underrated support is definitely Ornn. I want to play more Ornn support to give him a try. But Ornn support seems really, really good. And you can see the rest of the tier list there. But yeah, that's pretty much everything for the tier list. I don't really go over too much in these A/B patches sort of thing because there's not really that many changes in terms of the roles and everything that we're going through. But yeah, overall, I think I'm pretty happy with the tier list, and I'm pretty happy with how things are going on the website and everything as well. Yeah, if you don't know already, you can check out Wild Rift Fire. You can check out the builds over there as well. I always try and keep it all up to date as soon as possible, as soon as new builds come around or new champions come around and tier lists and things like that. Obviously, I have my rune and item tier list, which I need to get updated and make sure this is all good to go. But yeah, overall, pretty happy. I think the meta at the moment is pretty decent. There's no, I still think some champions need to be nerfed, like especially junglers like Talon and Lee Sin. I still think needs nerfs, and some mid lane as well, like Aurelion Sol, are just so disgusting. But I think overall the meta is pretty decent. I don't think there's anything too crazy out there. But yeah, let me know what you think of the tier list down below. Let me know if you think a champion deserves to be higher up or below in the tier list. And as always, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you all in the next Wilder video.